Generally speaking, both from a vendor and customer side, I feel like the go-to is a controller processor relationship because it manages risk in a way that both parties generally like. Where the reality of the situation states that both parties are controllers. So, if sorry, quick background for those who may not be as familiar. Controllers are those who decide what to do with the data. Processors are those who use the data as told to by the controller. And so a joint controller is when actually both parties make decisions about the data, but the same data set. And so that's just incredibly difficult from a practical perspective. So if you have a controller to controller relationship where I'm transferring data to you and you can use it for your own purposes, you can include limitations in the contract that says, okay, even though you're a controller, you're still only allowed to use the data for these purposes, right? Like
Hmm.
you're not prohibited from doing that. So I find that can be a more practical way to carry out a contract rather than joint controllers. Joint controllers also just don't exist in reality as much as sometimes they might be presented. There's because it has to be both parties making decisions about the same set of data. And so usually it's not the same set of data. It's I'm transferring data to you, you're using it for your purposes. You might be transferring other data back to me once you process it, but it's not okay, we both have this platform that we can both access and we're only using it for very specific reasons that we're making decisions about together.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so while that does exist, of course, that's why joint controllers exist. Generally speaking, if it's a joint controller situation, I'll look at the facts and say, okay, is this actually a joint controller situation? Does it make sense to be just a controller to controller relationship and put limitations on how the data could be processed?
I guess question for me is that, within certain engagements, do you see like different uses within the same agreement? So say something like usage data
Mhm,
or, that data which might be held in the platform or a SaaS solution,
mhm.
what's your advice on those situations then for a similar question?
So you can do a controller to controller slash controller to processor agreement where you say, okay, we have, you know, as as your vendor, we're going to be processing this data on your behalf, and
Hmm.
we are only going to do this on your behalf, and we don't have to, and we'll do whatever you say. But then this other data, we're going to process on our own behalf.
Hmm.
And for those kinds of data, we're going to have a controller to controller relationship. I think one example that I really like to use, once again, not because I just think it's a good example, is ADP. A lot of us are familiar with
Hmm.
ADP. They give us our paychecks. We really like that. Once, so in addition to your employer having a relationship with ADP, they are their vendor, you actually also have a relationship with ADP. And
Hmm.
so there's certain data that they might be getting from your employer. And I have not looked at an ADP contract, to be clear. This is just about the relationship. They might get certain information from your employer that they can keep, right? Your W-2. I can go back to previous employers and find my W-2, and I would venture to guess that my employer can't delete my W-2 from ADP, right? That is it in that relationship. Once again, I haven't actually looked at the contract, but because there's those multi-levels of relationships, I would imagine that their data processing agreements are covering all of those because, yeah, I can go back 2 jobs ago and still find my own work.